Asterisk, the heat wave that summer was brutal. For 3 weeks straight, temperatures soared above 95 degrees Fahrenheit, and the humidity made it feel like walking through soup. Our family's old lake house in upstate New York became our refuge, a weathered wooden cabin built in the 1940s, surrounded by tall pines and sitting right on the edge of Mirror Lake. I was 22 and had just graduated college when my parents suggested I spend a few weeks there alone to decompress before starting my job search. The house had been in our family for generations, and I'd spent countless childhood summers there. It felt like the perfect escape. The first few days were blissful. I'd wake up to the sound of lapping water, spend my mornings reading on the dock, and cool off with afternoon swims. The nearest neighbor was half a mile away through dense woods, so the silence was complete, except for the occasional loon call echoing across the lake. But on the fourth night, something changed. I was lying in bed around 2 a.m. when I heard a soft creaking sound from the front porch. The old wooden boards had always groaned under footsteps, and I knew that particular sound well. Someone was walking slowly back and forth across the porch. My first thought was a raccoon or maybe a bear. Wildlife was common around the lake. But as I listened more carefully, the pattern was too deliberate, too rhythmic. Step, creak, step, creak, pause, Then the same sequence repeated. I grabbed my phone's flashlight and crept to the front window. The porch was empty, bathed in pale moonlight, but the creaking continued for another 10 minutes before stopping abruptly. The next morning, I examined the porch closely. The old boards were dusty from the summer heat, and I could see clear footprint impressions, bare feet, adult-sized, with unusually long toes. They circled the entire porch multiple times, always stopping directly in front of the window where I'd been looking out. That evening, I made sure all the doors and windows were locked before bed. The heat was stifling without the breeze, but I needed to feel secure. Around 3 a.m., the footsteps returned, but this time they were on the back deck overlooking the lake. I didn't investigate. Instead, I buried my head under the pillow and tried to convince myself it was just an animal. But deep down, I knew better. Animals don't pace in perfect circles for hours. The third night, I positioned myself in the kitchen with a clear view of both the front porch and back deck. I kept all the lights off and waited. At 2:47 a.m. exactly, a figure emerged from the tree line. Even in the moonlight, I could see it wasn't entirely human. It was tall, at least 7 feet, and impossibly thin. Its skin was pale white, almost luminescent in the darkness. But it was the way it moved that made my blood freeze. Each step was carefully placed, deliberate, like it was performing some kind of ritual dance. The thing approached the house slowly, its elongated limbs moving with an unsettling grace. When it reached the porch, it stopped and turned its head directly toward the kitchen window where I was hiding. I ducked below the counter, heart hammering. Through the thin walls, I could hear it climbing the porch steps. Then came the familiar creaking as it began its methodical pacing. For 2 hours, it walked back and forth. Occasionally, I heard it stop, always in front of a window, and I imagined it pressing its face against the glass, peering inside. When sunrise finally came, the footsteps stopped. I waited another hour before looking outside. The porch was empty, but the smell lingered, a sour, organic odor like rotting fish mixed with wet earth. I should have left that morning. Every rational part of my brain screamed at me to pack up and drive back to the city. But something kept me there. morbid curiosity mixed with the stubborn belief that I could figure out what was happening. The fourth night, I decided to confront it. I positioned myself on the couch with a baseball bat and my phone ready to call 911 at 2:47 a.m. The exact same time I heard movement in the woods. But this time, instead of waiting, I turned on every light in the house and stepped onto the front porch. "I know you're out there," I shouted into the darkness. "What do you want?" The forest fell completely silent. No insects, no night birds, nothing. Even the lake seemed to stop lapping against the shore. Then I heard a sound that still haunts my dreams. It was laughter, but not human laughter. It started as a low chuckle and slowly grew into a cackling that echoed across the water. Dark sound seemed to come from everywhere at once: the trees, the lake, even from inside the house behind me. I ran back inside and slammed the door, fumbling with the locks. The laughter continued for what felt like hours, rising and falling like a twisted symphony. That night, it didn't just pace on the porch. I heard it moving around the entire house, scratching at windows, testing door handles, even climbing onto the roof. At one point, something heavy dragged across the ceiling directly above my bed. When morning came, I found scratches in the wood around every window and door. Deep gouges that looked like they'd been made by claws or very long fingernails. I packed my car that morning, but as I was loading my bags, I found something that made me drop everything and run. Hanging from the pine tree closest to the house was a collection of small bird bones, maybe squirrel bones, enmeshed in an intricate pattern with fishing line. They moved gently in the breeze, creating a soft clicking sound. But that wasn't the worst part. Carved into the tree's bark, fresh enough that sap was still bleeding from the cuts, was a message. "Summer friend returns next year." I drove away so fast I left half my belongings behind. When I called my parents to tell them what happened, they were quiet for a long time. Finally, my father spoke up. "We should have told you," he said. "Your grandfather mentioned something years ago about its presence around the lake house. He said it only appeared during the hottest summers, and only when someone stayed there alone." "Why didn't you warn me?" I demanded. "We thought it was just the old man's imagination. The heat getting to him, you know. He used to say it was drawn to solitude, to people who were isolated and vulnerable." I never went back to the lake house. My parents ended up selling it the following spring to a developer who tore it down to build condominiums. But sometimes, on particularly hot summer nights, I still hear that awful laughter echoing in my dreams. And every year, when the temperature hits 95 degrees Fahrenheit for the first time, I make sure I'm never alone. Because some things are attracted to the summer heat, to the people who try to escape it in isolated places. The woods remember, the water remembers, and somewhere out there, patient and hungry, something is still waiting for the next solitary soul who thinks they can find peace in the summer darkness. The scariest part. Last week, I got a call from someone who bought property near where the old lake house used to stand. They wanted to know if I'd ever experienced anything unusual during my stay there. They mentioned hearing laughter coming from across the water on hot nights and finding bone arrangements in the trees. Asterisk. My name's Kyle, and last summer I learned that some things are better left unexplored. I was home from college in Maryland, enjoying a break with my two closest friends, Jason and Marcus. We decided to take a weekend trip to Ocean City, where Jason's family owned a small beach house. Friday was perfect upper 80s. humid air thick with the smell of sunscreen and salt water. We walked the boardwalk, played arcade games, and people watched as families enjoyed their vacations. Everything felt normal and fun that night. After grilling burgers and playing drinking games, someone suggested we return to the beach. There's something appealing about the ocean at night. The emptiness, the cool air, the peaceful sound of waves. We grabbed hoodies, phones, and a flashlight, planning just to hang out and walk along the shore. The beach was deserted except for a few boardwalk lamps and moonlight filtering through clouds. We walked along the surf, letting cold water occasionally hit our ankles, joking around and killing time. Eventually, we stopped near a lifeguard tower and lay in the sand, looking up at the sky. That's when Jason noticed something. "Is that someone walking over there?" he asked, sitting up suddenly. At first I saw nothing but a dark blur near the shoreline. Then I spotted a figure walking slowly along the water's edge, maybe 50 yards away. We assumed it was just another late-night beachgoer, but something about their movement was wrong. Their walk was stiff, slow, and mechanical. Their arms didn't swing naturally, and their posture was strange, head tilted down but not fully, like they were scanning the sand. We stopped talking and watched quietly. "What the hell are they doing?" I whispered, but Marcus suggested they were looking for something. Jason joked about a drunk tourist searching for lost keys. We tried to laugh it off, but I kept glancing at the figure. Minutes passed, and they stopped moving entirely. Now they stood completely still, definitely closer, maybe 30 yards away. The discomfort grew. "They've been standing there for like 5 minutes, Marcus said. "Who just stands like that?" Then Jason said something that made my stomach drop. "He's not just standing, he's looking at you, Kyle." I laughed nervously, insisting he was looking at the sand. But Jason shook his head. "No, look closer. His head's tilted at you." Jason pointed the flashlight and clicked it on. The beam hit the figure for just a second before the battery died and it flickered out. But that second was enough. I saw him grayish-white skin, no shirt, wearing wet jeans clearly soaked from the ocean. His arms hung completely limp at his sides. His head was tilted at an unnatural angle, and his eyes were wide open, almost bulging. The second that light hit him, he moved. Without hesitation, he broke into a full sprint straight at us. There was no build-up. He went from perfectly still to running at full speed, like he'd launched forward. The movement was completely unnatural. All three of us screamed and bolted. We didn't look back, just ran with our feet pounding into the sand, lungs burning. We sprinted all the way to the boardwalk steps and didn't stop until we reached the street. Only then did we turn around. He wasn't there. The beach was empty. There were no footprints behind us, just the sound of waves. We stood frozen, trying to make sense of what we'd seen. The walk back to the house was mostly silent. We locked all doors and windows, pulled the blinds shut, and stayed awake until sunrise. None of us could sleep. The next morning, we tried to rationalize it, probably just some drugged-out homeless guy trying to scare people. But deep down, none of us believed that. The way he moved appeared out of nowhere, left no footprints, it made no sense. We stayed one more night, but didn't leave the house. We left early the next morning. Over the following weeks, Jason started texting about dreams, the same dream repeatedly. He'd wake up to see the guy standing in his bedroom corner, soaking wet, head tilted, just staring. No movement, no talking, just standing. I didn't tell him I was having the identical dream. Sometimes I'd wake thinking I heard wet footsteps in my hallway, but when I checked, no one was there. Almost a year later, I was scrolling through a local Facebook group when someone posted a grainy, dark photo from Ocean City Beach. Does anyone know who this creepy guy is that I saw standing by the water at like 1 a.m.? I recognized him instantly, same posture, same pale skin, just staring down at the water. The comments chilled me. Dozens of people had seen him too. Some said he stood there for hours. One person watched him walk into the water and never come back out. Another found wet footprints on their back porch, 2 streets from the beach, no prints leading to or from them. I don't know what we saw that night, but I know this: I'll never go back to that beach after dark. I met Matt at a crowded bar one summer evening. I was out with friends, and we bonded over the Cubs game playing on the TV. My group gradually drifted away as Matt and I talked, so he never really got to know them properly. We exchanged Instagram handles. He had a decent following and seemed like any normal guy in his 20s who enjoyed going out, traveling, and staying active. Usually, when you meet someone at a bar and exchange contact info, nothing comes of it. But the very next day, something strange happened. I was at another bar with friends celebrating Tyler's birthday when I felt a tap on my shoulder. It was Matt, grinning as he said this was his favorite Saturday night spot. What were the odds? Matt hung around for most of the night, and everyone seemed to have a good time. The following weekend, he invited me golfing. I'm terrible at golf, but wanted to improve, so I agreed. My friends were too hungover to join us, so it was just Matt and me. We played 9 holes, grabbed food afterward, and I went home thinking, he seemed like a solid guy. Then came the Arizona invitation. Matt suggested a hiking trip to the Grand Canyon, something that had always been on my bucket list. My friends couldn't get time off work or afford the trip. Typical responses whenever I tried planning group adventures. When I asked Matt if any of his friends were coming, he said he was going solo. I found it odd since his Instagram made him seem popular, but I didn't dwell on it. We flew out on August 15th. Returning on the 18th, Matt had rented a car and booked an Airbnb. On the drive from the airport, we stopped for food and alcohol. It was late when we arrived, and after a few beers, I was ready for sleep. That's when I discovered there was only one bed. It's a pull-out couch, Matt said, pointing to where I sat. Don't worry about paying for the Airbnb. I couldn't complain about free accommodation, so I set up the sofa bed. It was surprisingly comfortable. Around midnight, I woke to Matt walking through the living room to get water. I'm a light sleeper, so I rolled over and went back to sleep. The next morning, Matt woke me early for our Grand Canyon hike. The Bright Angel Trail was brutal. I was dripping sweat and gasping for air while Matt laughed and told me to keep up. We took countless breaks for photos, but the experience was incredible. That evening, we explored Phoenix and hit multiple bars. Matt clearly loved his alcohol. We got extremely drunk though. Somehow I seemed drunker, despite matching him drink. For a drink, we had to leave the rental car and Uber back to the Airbnb. I plugged my phone in next to the couch and passed out. Hours later, I woke, needing the bathroom desperately. As I got up, I heard a floorboard creak under pressure. Scanning the dark room, I saw nothing. While in the bathroom, I heard a door click shut. Matt's bedroom door. When I tried the handle, it was locked. I knocked, but got no response. The next morning, I awoke with a pounding headache. The first thing I noticed was my phone. I'd left it charging on the floor beside the couch. but now it sat unplugged on the table. I chalked it up to being blackout drunk. We spent the day exploring, avoiding any strenuous activity. Despite my reluctance, Matt convinced me to drink again that night. Once more, we got ridiculously drunk and stumbled back to the Airbnb around 2 a.m. Matt insisted I take the bed since it was only fair. I didn't argue. I took my bag to his room, said goodnight, and closed the door without locking it. I woke in darkness, unsure what had disturbed my sleep. Looking around for my phone, I found the charging cord dangling empty from the outlet. My phone was gone. Again, then I screamed. Matt was lying face down on the floor on the far side of the bed, sprawled out like he'd been watching me sleep. He looked up, dazed, claiming he'd been so drunk he'd wandered in to sleep but remembered. I was there and crashed on the floor. His explanation made no sense. He was on the side furthest from the door. When I accused him of taking my phone, he played dumb, suggesting it might have fallen under the bed. He got on his knees, looked underneath, and immediately found it. "Bro, here it is," he said, pulling it out. I stared at him, feeling like I was looking at a complete stranger. I told him I'd go back to the couch, but he insisted on leaving instead. This time, I locked the door. I wish the story ended there. I woke one final time that night to a silhouette standing at the foot of my bed. For some reason, I didn't scream immediately. Matt sat on the bed and began rubbing my foot. That's when I exploded, screaming at him to get out. When he wouldn't move, I physically shoved him off the bed and out the door. I packed frantically while Matt sat on the couch, watching me like some creepy automaton. It was the most unsettling part of the entire experience. I called an Uber to the airport as the sun rose, waited hours for my flight, and paid to change seats so I wouldn't sit near him. Later, I blocked his number and Instagram, but not before investigating. I found an old photo of him with friends and messaged one of them. The response came within 10 minutes. "Nah guys, a freak. Run away." He told me about his own experience and how their entire friend group had to cut Matt off. The guy wasn't surprised by my Arizona story at all. "Guys should be in jail," he said. I thought Matt was just a normal guy looking for friendship. Instead, he turned out to be a potentially dangerous predator. I still wonder what he was trying to access on my phone during those long, dark nights.